NFL Week 9 seen some of the biggest performances of the fantasy football season at both the running back position, the wide receiver position, and we had some standout tight end performances as well. We are going to talk through that on today's show as myself, Colm Kelly, and Shawn Siegele look back on half the slate today, half the slate on the Wednesday show as we work our way through NFL Week 9. Shawn, I thought this was a very, very interesting week. I thought it was a very enjoyable week after the pain and suffering of NFL Week 8. But you and Ben had a couple of great shows at the end of last week on Stealing Bananas, where you talked through some of the scenarios and how the season has played out and kind of the bigger picture of what has gone on at the NFL as a result in fantasy football. We had the opening week was not the most exciting, but we've had a lot of exciting weeks. Then week 8 was a little bit of a downer week in terms of fantasy scoring as a whole. But week 9, I thought there was so many different areas to talk about. So that's what we're going to do today on the show. How are you feeling, Shawn? I was born on the 9th of February. I have a couple of lucky numbers, but 9 is one of them. And I think it came through here for some big plays to talk about.
Week 9 was fantastic. Mostly because, certainly not entirely, but mostly because we got what we hope is the full coming out performance from Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Colm, 7 receptions, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. The funny thing about this game here, where he scores 37 points, is that, I mean, it could have easily been a 50-point game. And, certainly things would have gone differently after some of these plays. But he had 78 yards called back on
2 penalties.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps his 2 most impressive yardage gains of the day were called back. He also had what could have been an 83-yard touchdown if Geno hits him on what granted would have been a very, very difficult play. 225 air yards, the third most air yards that any receiver has put up this season. I was kind of working back through the article I wrote about JSN in the offseason, and so many of the individual notes you could see manifested in important ways in this game. One of the things I talked about was the jump that Cooper Kupp had in his ADOT after Shane Waldron left. And I'm going to work through just the fact that you can be a slot receiver with an ADOT in that 7 to 10 range and still not just be solid, but be one of the best receivers in all of football. You can be a first-round pick. Another note from that is that it is nice if you can draw some deeper targets. It's nice if you're not consistently limited or exclusively limited to the slot. A lot of JSN's targets last year actually did come lined up out wide. I'm not sure that everyone realizes that. Certainly a lot of folks do. You could see in this game without DK Metcalf so much of the full range. Now, we did, even in this game, have a play where it was probably one of Geno's worst throws, and that's within the context of he made some excruciating throws in this game.
He may have been three of the worst throws of his career, Shawn, in this game.
When he was a young player, he made some pretty bad throws. But yes, the almost certainly his 2 worst passes ever. The third interception is one that glances off JSN's hands. You'd love to see him haul that in. It was behind him and off target, as opposed to what the commentator said. But I mean, he needs to make that catch as well. Colm, we now have a 16 target game. We have a 225 air yard game. We have an emergence without DK Metcalf. One of the things that is interesting about what these Seahawks are doing, and certainly not shocking considering the offensive coordinator, what we know the Seahawks want to do, but in the last 4 weeks now, a Seahawk has led the NFL at the receiver position in air yards 3 out of 4 games. The first two obviously came in week 6 and week 7 for DK Metcalf before he goes out with that injury. Through 7 weeks, JSN hadn't separated from Tyler Lockett. He does in this game. I think the hope that you have if you are a Seattle Seahawks fan or if you're a Jaxon Smith-Njigba fantasy manager is that once Metcalf comes back, this can be the NFL's best 1-2 punch. Geno seems to function better when he has those 2 targets as opposed to trying to incorporate the third one. I was kind of looking through some of the advanced numbers again in SIS as we were getting ready for the show. And another thing that I pointed out from that piece last season is that Geno's numbers with 2 receivers and play action are fantastic. His numbers with 3 receivers and motion are poor. That's not great, right? In terms of what we would like to really see happen in the future. But there are certainly things that you can build around with this Seahawks team when you have a player who probably has, and it might even be top 5, but certainly Geno has top 10 arm talent. Now you have to put that with the rest of the elements of playing the QB position. He might have top 5 arm talent. You have a Kenneth Walker. He struggled in this game. They actually got him a lot of touches. He couldn't find running room. That does make it a little bit more difficult to use some of those play action devices. But I think when you look at this Seahawks team that started fast and has been really fading, that if they come back after the bye and can make this offense even tighter around their 3-star skill players, there's certainly a light at the end of the tunnel. The Rams obviously win this game. They make some big plays in overtime, but the Seahawks defense was not the problem in this one.
Yeah, I think basically I agree with everything you said. There was a lot of those notes that I had taken during the game. The other thing we kind of joked about it last week, Shawn, this was another week where Kenneth Walker's trying to recover these botched snaps over Geno Smith's head. So there was a number of potential turnover issues like that. They were able to recover that one, but Geno did have 3 interceptions in this game. As I mentioned, 2 of those being 2 of the poor throws. This was a week that featured a lot of red zone turnovers, mainly interception based, but a lot of red zone turnovers. And Geno had a couple of them in this game, one of them going for a 103-yard return for a touchdown for the Rams. Really up until that point, the Rams were in a little bit of trouble here. You know, they have 3 points at halftime, 13-3. They do put up 10 points then in the fourth quarter or in the third quarter when the Seahawks were struggling. But another theme I thought for this week was, you know, writing out notes as I'm watching the games, and it felt like there was a couple of games where I've, you know, written something down, and then, you know, 30 minutes later, I'm just like putting by 2 beside it because I had written down JSN TD drive before the half because that was pretty much everything going through him. We had a CD Lamb touchdown drive last week, kind of like that, but pretty much then his second touchdown is a similar scenario where it's all gone through him as well. You mentioned some of the parts for how he was used and the air yards and so on. But the other part is like, you know, the route tracking in terms of where he was used and how he was used and the different, you know, ways they tried to get him open. They utilized kind of all the different ways to try and maximize a player's strengths in this one. And that's what I would be hoping, you know, is that a week 9 thing, or is that going to be a thing now as we move forward? So you mentioned also the 13 targets in this one. He led ahead of everyone. The next highest is AJ Barner with 7 targets. So again, there is, you know, get DK Metcalf back in the lineup. You know, there's still targets to go around. It's not like he got 13 here and they have to, you know, share that with DK specifically. Lockett just got the 4. He was the 3rd highest, and the 13 targets going the way of JSN. A note on the other side, obviously very fantasy relevant. Puka Nacua did get ejected in this one for a punch. I thought it was a kind of a very soft ejection overall, but that did rule him out after just the 1 reception. So that led to the 14 targets then for Cooper Kupp. We get 9 targets to Demarcus Robinson. He gets in the end zone for the winner in overtime. He also gets in the end zone during the game, 6 for 94 for him. I thought overall the Seahawks done everything they could to lose this game, and I feel like, you know, if they played this game another 10 times, they probably win 8 of them. There was just too many mistakes to overcome when it got to that point at the end. They get that drive to tie it up, but they cannot get it done then in overtime. So I'm really hoping, Shawn, like you said, this is the start of the breakout for JSN. If we look over the course of the season, he had 2 targets week 1, 3 targets in week 3, 4 targets in week 6, and 3 targets then in week 8. So every second week he's kind of dipped down in targets, in receptions rather than targets. But I do see a case here where, week 2 he has 12 receptions for 117 yards against the Patriots. There is an upward trajectory, I think, coming. The other thing with him that's very interesting, I think, is, when you look at a player who came into the league last year, he's still just 22. There's a lot of the rookies that have come in this year that are older than JSN. So it's very exciting. And, I was thrilled as to see how this performance, to put all the pieces together for him. Another player, Shawn, who's putting a lot of pieces together, and we haven't talked a huge amount about the Ravens in recent weeks, but we got another big day here for Zay Flowers. He gets 6 targets, 5 receptions, 127 yards, 2 touchdowns. One of those being a 53-yard touchdown with, realistically, when he receives that, he shouldn't be getting to the end zone. A lot of yards after the catch on a kind of a broken play defensively. But he now has 100+ receiving yards in 4 of the last 5 games. I don't know what's left to say about Derrick Henry. He got his first touchdown in this game, being his 100th touchdown. He's the tied 5th fastest with Adrian Peterson, now 128 games to get to that. He got a second touchdown later in the game. He had 106 rushing yards, 27 yards on 1 reception as well to go along with that. He's just, I have no more words to describe what we're looking at here with Derrick Henry. Lamar Jackson didn't do much rushing in this, just the 4 rushing yards on the 3 attempts, but 16 of 19, 280, 3 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Shawn, we can kind of say what we like about the Ravens and how much they're going to pass, but when you're this efficient and with how Lamar Jackson is playing and how Henry is also playing in this offense, are they the best offense in the NFL? I know you're going to lean towards the Lions potentially, but the Ravens here are destroying teams.
They are. They've lost 3 games, including the Raiders, who just fired everybody, and to the Cleveland Browns. So I think that we have to keep that context in place. But yeah, they're extraordinary because this Denver Broncos defense is really good. I still think the Denver Broncos are going to make the playoffs, perhaps even fairly easily. There was some pushback from the Broncos defense at times, and yet it tended to fade away. And so much of that really, we had a couple of these plays from Derrick Henry that were sort of peak Derrick Henry, including, I think, the 27-yard reception. But I mean, this game is Zay Flowers. And this is one of the reasons that we said you'd have to look out for some of the other receiving targets. A pretty disappointing game here from Mark Andrews, who had been on a touchdown hot streak, but goes back to just the 2 targets for 26 yards in this one. I mean, Zay Flowers only draws the 6 targets, right? He's coming off of a week 8 in which he led the NFL in air yards. One of the notes in the Monday piece that will come out later this afternoon, maybe as people are listening to this, is that we are now looking at profiles from JSN and Zay Flowers that are in many ways somewhat similar. Their ADOTs are pretty similar. They both have a huge air yards game. Clearly, Flowers is, I think, the most dynamic receiver in the NFL right now in terms of with the ball in his hand. Anytime, especially in a Baltimore Ravens passing offense, where you can go one week where you lead in air yards, the next week you are second in the NFL in yards after the catch. Zay Flowers is the perfect receiver in that the before the reception part is absolutely perfect. No one gets open the way that he does. The catch point has been solid. And then after the catch, I mean, he should not have scored the way he did in this game, but he's breaking free, making moves that, again, I think defenses, when they get this spread out, when you're having to account for so many different pieces, this is an offense that in many ways is just absolutely unfair, and they're going to have Deontay Johnson as we kind of go through. I mean, they should score almost every possession, and that's one of the reasons the Broncos in this game were extremely aggressive, and man, they were close to making the first half interesting. Obviously, they weren't close to winning this game, but you have a variety of plays where they are stopped on fourth down.
There's one where Williams is stopped on fourth down where it's a challenge by the Ravens. It's obviously given as a first down, and they challenge it, and it's very close, but they overturn it. The Broncos at that point are competitive. There's points of this where it looks very competitive. They also have a situation in the first half where Bo Nix has a rushing touchdown, then it's ruled out for a holding penalty. A couple of different things like that where it could have been even closer than it ended up being at halftime, and then the Ravens really pulled away from that point forward. It's 24-10 at the half, but I think this game could have been much closer at that point. But the problem was then that every error offensively or defensively that the Broncos made, the Ravens punished it.
Yeah, you had some really poor play from Lil Jordan Humphrey in this one. I believe that he is the receiver who tipped the interception to start the game. He had a play in the end zone where the commentators are begging him to put his other hand out. We get a call from Jim Nance that Big Jordan Humphrey would have made that play, which seems kind of borderline.
Little Jordan Humphrey couldn't make it.
So I was a little surprised to hear that call. Yeah, you turn the ball over on downs a couple of times when you're moving. And this is the game where
they also, Shawn, sorry to interrupt, had a 4th and 4 where they go for a deep shot again to what's his name, Troy Franklin. And what happens when you pass?
Are you trying to figure out
overthrown?
Like if these two guys
have ever played together?
Well, you kind of want to go back and watch their Oregon tape and figure out how they ever completed a pass, because the two probably best passes of the season from Bo Nix were bombs that were dropped by Troy Franklin. And then here on 4th and 4, he has Franklin behind the defense for a potential touchdown, at the very least a conversion.
Definite touchdown. So he's basically Shawn, he's at the 2-yard line with nobody to tackle him. He just needs to catch the ball.
So the question that we do have, that we still can't answer, is that if Bo Nix had thrown yet another beautiful deep ball, would Troy Franklin have dropped that? We don't know, because Nix did miss him. That was disappointing. Colm, on the positive side, which I don't know that you need to work super hard to find positives when your team lost 41-10, but Bo Nix demonstrated crazy athleticism throughout this game. He catches a touchdown pass. You mentioned the rush play that was called back. That would have been nice to have. Obviously, he did kind of the video game thing where he was running back and forth across the field as the Baltimore Ravens defenders chased him, and you kept waiting for that to cause a huge problem. It basically did not. It also didn't really lead to any impressive plays. But we get 7 for 122 from Courtland Sutton. He is tackled on the 1-yard line, more like the 1-foot line, late in the game. So, unfortunately, some opportunities for more points for Nix, for Sutton, if you had played them.
And don't rule out, Shawn. I know we're not talking up Sutton very often, but Bo Nix did catch a touchdown. Courtland Sutton did throw that touchdown. So Courtland
Sutton threw a touchdown. I mean, this could have been a monster game from Courtland Sutton with just a few tiny things going differently. And the interesting thing there is that they added some misdirection on this play. Hand off a pitch, Courtland Sutton throws it. Bo Nix was not wide open.
He boxed out.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like a big tight end.
It was a beautiful throw from Sutton, and it did give you the impression that if he fails as a quarterback, that Bo Nix could eventually play. I don't know. I mean, the tight
one of my
ends are
favorite
big,
things.
but
One of my favorite things I seen on social media after this game yesterday was that the realization that Bo Nix had during this game is that he is the Broncos wide receiver one all along. So I did enjoy that.
Yeah. So again, Zay Flowers, extraordinary. He looks really, really good.
Yeah, the numbers here aren't huge for Nix. 223 passing yards, no passing touchdowns, 1 interception, takes the 4 sacks for 28 yards, 19 of 33. So, it doesn't look great overall. It has the reception for the touchdown, but I thought some of the play, particularly in the first half, was among Nix's best so far in the NFL. Looked very in control of the offense. I mentioned, the Russian touchdown, that one's called back. He does have an overthrow. You mentioned Jordan Humphrey at the back of the end zone, where I think it's more on a separate play to the one you mentioned. I think it's more on Nix for that overthrow, but
there was a separate play there too.
Yeah,
right.
This could have been an absolutely massive day. That touchdown attempt that we were talking about there to Troy Franklin would have been in the kind of 25 to 30 yard range from what I remember from the overall play, but could have been a massive day.
This should have been a 35-point game for Bo Nix. Left quite a bit on the field. The flip side of that is that you contrast sort of this matchup, which is, the Baltimore Ravens pass defense has been bad, but you think about Caleb Williams and what happened in Arizona, which Colm, I have been to football games there in Phoenix. I'm watching this game and it's raining. I'm like, yeah, it's raining today in Arizona. Everybody knew it was going to rain today in Arizona. How is the roof open? I'm like, what is happening here?
The commentators are talking about, it takes 10 minutes to close the roof, and it's trickling in. But eventually, Shawn, they did get that roof closed. I guess maybe we can jump to that game at this particular point in time, because there wasn't anything massive to discuss in it from, I don't think offensive perspective. We talked, me and you.
Other than Caleb Williams looks unbelievably bad. I think when you're the quarterback, it's a little bit different than when you're the receiver. Like, I can make excuses for all these receivers because they have Shane Waldron. What is Caleb Williams doing? Like, somehow make some sandlot plays. You're telling me that Russell Wilson, like a young Russell Wilson, not the current version that we have, but a young Russell Wilson with any coordinator couldn't have stood back there and figured out a way to make some plays? What is happening?
This game in general, I thought was a damning indictment for the Bears. We've seen a couple of coaching firings over the last kind of 6 or 7 hours as we record this, both for the Saints. We've seen a clear out with the Raiders, the head coach still there at this time of recording, but the Bears situation, I think they're really on the hot seat. They could be next in line as we look around. 22 completions, 41 attempts, but there was nothing here. 6 sacks for 45 yards. Odunze does have 104 yards and 5 receptions, but Shawn, another player who I think is potentially cooked at this particular point is Keenan Allen. The other thing with this offense is Colm doesn't draw a target in this game. Williams just looks at times to that Bryce Young kind of performance level from last year, where he's completely flustered and under just so much kind of pressure in that moment that he's not able to calibrate the right decision making. But this was bad. On the other side, it was also pretty bad from the Arizona Cardinals. The one thing that they were really bailed out by kind of in this game is the Chicago Bears did not understand that they probably should try and stop some of these running backs as they cruise through. They gave up, Shawn. They give up a rushing touchdown with a 53-yard rushing touchdown with, I believe, 30 seconds left in the first half to DeMarcado, which I seen it happening and I was like, what has happened here? So that obviously changed the game again. They're 21-9 down at halftime, but they couldn't stop anything. James Conner 18 for 107 on the ground. Trey Benson in there for a touchdown, 8 for 37 for him. Trey McBride, kind of day was almost saved in this one from a rushing touchdown on an end around where he kind of bullies the cornerback to get into the end zone. But really,
guy's like, I've got you walled off. I've got you stopped. And Trey McBride's like, no.
So
Colm, You'll probably get to it. We had the single worst play of Kyler Murray's career in this game, which is saying something because Kyler Murray.
That was another theme
awful.
of the week, Shawn.
I mean, this is a game that's 29-9 against a Chicago Bears team that had looked good in spurts, and yet it featured 154 passing yards from Kyler Murray in the single worst play of his entire career.
We did make a lot of talking about the pick six that Gardner Minshew threw against the Broncos, which was returned obviously for a touchdown. That was a wide open play to Brock Bowers. That one obviously did not work out. This is one where there's the play action. There's a pirouette even in it from Kyler Murray. But, when you have Trey McBride wide open in the end zone, would you overthrow him by 15 yards?
Colm, this is a situation where
he can't see over the offensive line, Shawn. He cannot.
Not at all. Just not at all.
I am convinced.
But also, do you not know the play call? Because this entire play was set up to get Trey McBride wide open in the end zone. They run the play, and I think it had to have shocked everyone that although the play was to get Trey McBride open in the end zone, I'm sure it wasn't a play where they thought that no one from Chicago would go with him at any point. And so the play works exactly how it's supposed to. And Trey McBride is wide open. And Kyler Murray is like, I just simply can't see over there and have no idea what's going on. So then he does the pirouette, like you're saying, and you're like, oh, he missed the fact that the Trey McBride is wide open. And so you see Trey McBride, and immediately he's, again, wide open, and he's so disappointed because he's like, that was the way the play was supposed to work, and no one came with me. There aren't even other options on the play. So then Kyler Murray is doing this pirouette, as you mentioned, and he's coming back around, and no one from Chicago is getting to him because not only did they not cover Trey McBride, but they're getting no pressure. And so then you're thinking, well, other Cardinals are now getting open in the end zone, but there's still no one over with Trey McBride. Is there any possibility that at some point Kyler Murray will decide to throw it to Trey McBride? So then you cut to Trey McBride again, and he continues to kind of move a little bit more toward the corner, try and create some separation between himself and the theoretical Chicago Bears defenders who might at some point decide to go cover him. So then he puts his arms up again, and he's like, I'm wide open. And Murray kind of rolls that direction, and he starts to get into a situation where he's like, I might be able to see around the line. And then you see Murray take his arm back and get ready to throw the ball. And you're thinking, he's going to throw it to McBride, and maybe he'll be open to the, maybe he's still open. Again, cut back to McBride, and you can see his eyes light up. And then Trey McBride, again, Kyler Murray now has him again. He throws the ball basically in the stands. And as the ball is flying over Trey McBride's head, he's looking at it I'm still uncovered. And there's still no, what is happening here?
And if anyone's listening and they haven't seen this play, go and find it. But the way Shawn has told it, when the play was live, when I seen it for the first time before it went to replay, it felt like it took that length of time for it to develop as Shawn told it there. It probably took 8 seconds. But the one part you're hoping there with Kyler is that he tries to get around the edge of the defender and then sees that he's wide open and throws it to him. But he kind of, I think he made the decision that he's not going to get to the end zone himself. So I think he's throwing it away. I think it's just a coincidence that it's within the region that Trey McBride actually was. But it's just an absolutely dreadful play. But I've said this on a bunch of shows. When he's behind the offensive line, unless it's a play that, and this one was designed, but they're just going further downfield or that there's more separation, I do think that he can't see what he's trying to process at that moment in time. So that's obviously a challenge for a quarterback. Shawn, I am going to give
also a challenge for Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride, who, if they played for almost any other team, would be lighting the world. I don't know about Harrison, right? He has the 5 targets in this game. He just catches 2 for 34. One of those, he catches it, and then the defender takes it away from him. I can't be bothered to either run for it or get down. The effort level from Harrison has been extremely disappointing. This is a Cardinals team that is pretty weird because they're awful, but they're also 5-4. And you look at the NFC West, and the teams are all bunched right there together. The only one with a positive point differential is the 49ers. You have a mobile quarterback. You are doing some interesting things as a defensive backfield, right? The Cardinals' pass defense is awful, but it's also creative. And so you do give some teams some trouble. Certainly they gave Caleb Williams a lot of trouble in this game. It's a team that actually has a shot because of the exact context, and yet the failure to really develop Trey McBride. And I think it's very fair for people to say, look, you guys are just like so obsessed with Trey McBride because you have him on all your teams. But this is the guy, again, where his touchdown run was awesome. On the 3 receptions that he has, again this week, one of them he catches, he's moving, the defender comes in attack. He hurdles, like the hurdle that he makes isn't like one of these things where a guy jumps up in the air, has his momentum stop, somebody else comes and hits him, and you're like, you're going to get yourself hurt. He hurdled it like he was in the
Olympics.
Yeah, in the Olympic hurdle competition. Like has the legs, not like jump up in the air, but like do that side thing where you clear the hurdle. He comes down and continues his momentum and is running. This guy is an absolute freak, the level of which we basically never see in the NFL. I mean, Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, those guys are nothing compared to Trey McBride from an athletic perspective, getting open, running with the ball. Those aren't the only things. I mean, you need to have quarterback play. You need to have the tough. I mean, Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce, probably the 2 greatest tight ends ever. I'm sure that, some Chiefs fans are going to be like, don't you remember Tony Gonzalez? And I do. Tony Gonzalez probably would have had twice as many yards in today's NFL, because anyone who does remember those days, Tony Gonzalez would run his routes and the linebacker would simply bear hug him the whole time. He'd have to pick the guy up, run with him. If he ever tried to break free, he would get called for offensive pass interference. Tony Gonzalez was amazing, right? What Trey McBride brings to the table, what Marvin Harrison might bring. I mean, this is a guy who, again, was advertised as a generational prospect. The Cardinals cannot afford to not develop those guys in a season where they're now 5-4 and have a legitimate shot to make the playoffs out of the lousy NFC West, or at least the very interesting NFC West, where all 4 of those teams are all over the place, a lot of playmakers. You still expect the 49ers to come out of it, but the 49ers have given you this opening. Develop your players. Be an offensive juggernaut. I mean, again, this is a game where we had rain inside a roof stadium in Arizona, so there was some goofiness involved.
Yeah, and I do think that the Cardinals will have huge weeks on offense. I think they'll also be capped in terms of their, playoff aspirations if they make it to that point in terms of advancing deep into the playoffs. But Shawn, one thing I will cut maybe a little bit of slack to Caleb Williams, and we didn't mention this with Geno Smith either, but Geno Smith was, pressured by the Rams at almost a historic rate on Sunday in terms of the time that he was under duress. And the Cardinals also put a lot of pressure, as you kind of referenced there, on Caleb Williams. So the situation, they had 16 different players for the Cardinals got a pressure on him. It was the most individual players that got a pressure for a defense since 2018. So they had a 46% pressure rate on Williams' drop back. So, that makes it a little bit more difficult, but that's also on the offensive design to make sure that you can cover up on that theme.
Colm,
here.
You had mentioned, Keenan Allen being washed. This is a game where he draws 10 targets for only 36 yards, but DJ Moore draws 9 for 33. Keenan Allen and DJ Moore got 19 targets and gained 69 yards. So, I mean, I think it is probably fair to say that Keenan Allen is not operating at a super high level, and yet he was equally effective to DJ Moore in this game. We can surmise that DJ Moore is not washed. One of the things that happened, I said that all of the scrambling from Bo Nix didn't really accomplish that much. He had 6 carries for 36 yards, and again, had that touchdown called back. Caleb Williams in this one, and again, the exact environment is going to matter, but there were times here where it looked like he was going to break free, run. If you are a fantasy manager of Williams, like just run, right? Pick up some yardage. move the chains, stay alive, 4 carries, 5 yards, and in part because he didn't appear to have that ability to find those creases to gain the yards, things that we're seeing from guys like Nix and Jaden Daniels. One of the only 2 games I haven't watched as we record this is what doesn't come off as that exciting of a matchup to start with in terms of Tennessee Titans, New England Patriots. I did have a lot of defenses playing in that game, so I was interested to see if we had enough offensive miscues to make that work out. Colm, you had shared with me a play where Drake May scrambles about for like 3 or 4 minutes, right? And then throws the touchdown. That's the kind of thing, again, that we're not seeing from Caleb Williams. Granted, I don't think that he is the number one culprit, but at the same time, you want to see a guy with his supposed abilities, like, just make a play at some point. It was exciting that Rome Odunze did go over 100 in this one. If they turn both of these guys into busts, I mean, think about what the Carolina Panthers did and all of the pieces that they gave away to the Bears. I mean, the Bears' entire offense is basically just things that the Carolina Panthers gave them for no reason. And yet, right now, the teams are in vaguely similar circumstances, in part because of who the Chicago Bears have decided to employ.
And Shawn, I would be remiss. You did mention you didn't see the Patriots game yet. I know you also haven't seen the Eagles game, and people will hear us talking about that Trey McBride hurdle. Shawn, you're going to see Saquon Barkley do a hurdle where he hurdles kind of almost backwards over a defensive player, which was absolutely spectacular. So you will get to see that when you run through that game.
I thought maybe you were going to say, with Saquon Barkley, you could almost imagine him like doing some like motorcycle over a bunch of cars type of play.
He did a play.
You start the hurdle and like 3 or 4 defenders come in, try and break him down. He's like, no, I'm going to have like 15 air yards just on this vault.
Well, Shawn has not seen the play yet, but he has successfully described it in that matter. It is one of the craziest plays of the season so far. So shout out Saquon Barkley for that one. We have kind of talked about some of the kind of highlight players, highest scoring players so far of the week. We obviously had Thursday Night Football where your boy Garrett Wilson gets in the end zone twice, has a spectacular catch to end that one. He kicked off the week in fun form, but one of the players I want to talk about, Shawn, is De'Von Achane. He obviously has had a tricky season, as had the Dolphins, without Tua in there for a majority of the season. But the 4 games that Tua has been involved in, he has finished at worst running back 2 on the week. The Dolphins don't get a win here. They're 2-6 on the season, but he has 12 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown, but he has 8 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets. And the question, I guess, looking into this is he leads the team in targets. Next up is Tyreek Hill with 5. Jonnu Smith with 6, then Tyreek Hill with 5. But then we're looking at Jalen Waddle with 2. Now, Waddle does get a touchdown at the very end of this game. He has 2 targets. Unfortunately, when you get to the end of it, it works out at -4 yards. And the reason for that is he has, a play at the end where, you have to try and go and get the points to get the win. But he unfortunately lost 24 yards on that last play to take him to those minus yardage totals.
I have a team column where it includes him. And in the ideal world, he would just be benched, right? But it's a team that is almost like this perfect team, and it has Nico Collins. And if we could just get it into the FFPC playoffs, I feel like obviously there are going to be so many good teams in the playoffs for that $1 million, but I desperately want to get this team in. If it misses by 2 points because Jalen Waddle runs so far backward, you're just like, don't let yourself be tackled. Don't let yourself be tackled. Also try and get it to someone else without committing a turnover.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing here?
So that was unfortunate.
He did manage to catch a touchdown after it looked like he was going to leave this game with basically no points. You got to take the small victories when it comes to Jalen Waddle, who I don't know. Is there anyone in the NFL? I mean, maybe you could look at T. Higgins as being vaguely similar, since at one point he looked like a superstar. Now he basically never plays football. But you think about Jalen Waddle, where he was at about a year ago. But even before that, like, This is someone who, in his first 2 seasons, he had a monster catch year as a rookie before the Tua experience, where they were getting him like 15 6-yard catches a game. And then you come in with Tua and Tyreek Hill, and you're like, oh, I mean, Jalen Waddle can get down the field. He's one of the fastest players in football. He looks like he's going to be a 1-2 punch with Tyreek Hill. Now, in this game, again, the Buffalo Bills have been very difficult to pass the ball on. It wasn't surprising that they had to manufacture some things. I thought it was an extremely encouraging performance from Tua, where you only take the 1 sack, you don't throw a pick, you average over 8 yards per attempt, you get a couple of touchdowns in there. A lot of that, as you said, does come down to Achane. But, I mean, they managed this game perfectly. Frustrating, I think, for them that Waddle has more or less disappeared. And then a week ago in the Zero RB universe, I was begging for the Dolphins to use Jalen Wright more. He looked a lot better than Mostert. They do use him a bit in this game, but very ineffectively. It is a game where Mostert looked more like his 2023 self, where he's getting chunk plays. He gets the 56 yards on the 10 carries. But Colm, I mean, the Dolphins now, and for Mostert a couple of times, had games that they would have. I mean, the Dolphins would be right in it if not for Raheem Mostert back-breaking fumbles. You can certainly understand why they want to limit Achane's opportunities to 20 per game. I mean, this is a game where you're constantly watching thinking, why are Mostert and Wright carrying the ball when you have like the most electric back outside of Jahmyr Gibbs on your team here? And yet at the same time, 20 opportunities. You cannot give that little dude more than that. They used him perfectly. Everything about this was exactly how you would want this game to go, other than the Ray Davis receiving touchdown, right? Other than that play, the Dolphins played this game perfectly, but they lose because of that Mostert fumble.
Yeah, so that was a 63-yard play to Ray Davis, and he kind of breaks one tackle and he goes the distance to the end zone. That was towards the end of the game. But you mentioned Achane. The way, obviously, I would rather him be used is if we're going to get him 8 receptions every game, Shawn, we can skip on those 8 extra carries. So the Dolphins are using him very effectively. The question I have is, like, with Waddle, he's almost phasing Waddle out of the passing game because he's so integral, and obviously the completions to him and the efficiency that he's showing on all those plays is highly beneficial to the Rams. This was a bit of a weird game in general. The Bills get the win basically because they do a lot of the things right in terms of they do recover that fumble from Mostert, but Coleman has a bobble inside the 10-yard line early in the game, which leads to Josh Allen's interception. He's going to be inside the 5 if he makes the catch, bounces off his chest, and it is picked off. Josh Allen also had a rushing TD in this 20-yard play called back for, I thought, a relatively questionable call in the second quarter. It was a strong punch.
I mean, certainly I'm rooting against Josh Allen in most circumstances, and yet, I mean, that's a bad call.
Yeah, I thought it was a really poor call. The punch out, again, we've seen this defense are really coming along with punching the ball out, in those fumble situations. But that was a good defensive play. But Mostert did lose that particular fumble. And after the fumble, the snap rate from that point forward, Achane was in 79% of the time. We have Wright in 24 and 10% of the snaps just for Mostert. So he was kind of phased out after that particular point off the game. Achane, as we've touched on already, had a nice day, but he set career highs in receptions, route rate, and target share in this game as well. So lots of positivity there for him and that kind of aspect. But there was a number of different plays, like there's a touchdown pass by Josh Allen to Quentin Morris in this. It's his only reception. It's a 2-yard touchdown. I'm still not convinced that, we're talking about Kyler can't see the players he's trying to pass. I'm not convinced that Josh Allen seen that Morris was there when he threw that ball.
Do you think that Josh Allen can't see him, or do you think that Josh Allen
look past
can see everything and
most likely
through people
and like a matrix?
Because now, granted, again, he only passed for 6 yards per attempt in this game. The Dolphins averaged more yards per play. The Dolphins did a lot of things right. I should have mentioned the Coleman drop because that kind of balances out the 2 big misses. I think that's a sort of a subtly hard catch to make when you have that in-breaking route by the goal line. You know you're about to get hit. That ball gets on you in a hurry.
Yeah.
So in terms of the level of difficulty, I think it's probably harder than it seems. It's still a play that destroys their win probability early and put the Dolphins in a situation to win this game. Hopefully Coleman ends up being all right. It sounds like maybe a wrist injury that he has. He's been very hot and cold. The other one that was just so disappointing in this game, you talk about Josh Allen having the superpowers, and he does. He's also just not that accurate at times. 10 targets to Dalton Kincaid. This should have been the Kincaid breakthrough game. All of those targets were on his feet. Now, there were 2 or 3 where you're like maybe you still catch that. If you're an actual star, you catch that. The passes to Kincaid were atrocious. Like, just make those 10 targets higher quality because he's open. Obviously, the receptions from Kincaid would count in a big way in tight end premium. It's a good game. I mean, I don't think there have been too many teams in NFL history that were 2-6 and were as good as this Miami Dolphins team. I think that if you were the Ravens or the Chiefs or the Lions, you wouldn't want to face them in the playoffs or the Super Bowl. They're not going to get anywhere close to making that.
The last game, Shawn, we're going to touch on today, Giants and Commanders. I don't have a lot of notes on this game. It was kind of a messy game overall. And then, Daniel Jones gets in the end zone on a rushing play. They pick up some points, and it gets a little bit closer maybe than people would have been expecting as the game progressed. I thought Daniels looked good again. 15 of 22, 209, 2 touchdowns for him in the air. We get a rushing touchdown for Austin Eckler in this one. We get those 2 passing touchdowns going to Terry McLaurin. He's 2 for 19 for 2 touchdowns on 3 targets, so very efficient from him. But Shawn, overall in this game, I didn't think there was a huge amount that would stand out. We get 11 targets for Neighbors, 9 receptions, just the 59 yards. Wendell Robinson had a touchdown ruled out in this for, I thought, one of the softest pick play penalties that I've ever seen in the NFL. I honestly don't know how they've given a flag for that, but it finishes 27-22. Daniel Jones has a good fantasy day. Any notes that you want to share on this particular game?
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand why teams this sort of leaks into my frustration with your Green Bay Packers, a game that we'll talk about on the next show. But if you think that you have a strength or you have a tactical opportunity that you want to exploit, and certainly we have discussed some circumstances in the last couple of weeks where a defense is really good at stopping either the run or the pass and not very good on the other side, and the team has come out and attacked the strength, and you're thinking, there may be some value to that at times, but you do want to maintain some tactical balance, and you want to make sure that you don't leave the game without exploiting their weaknesses. The Giants come out in this game and basically just suck the entire time out of it. Like, got Tyrone Tracy going everywhere. You've got Jaden Daniels going everywhere. Let's not come out and run the ball a billion times to start the game. You're not going to score points that way. And you have taken away the value that Tracy has by just slamming him into the line without any creativity over and over and over. Why not throw the ball to Malik Neighbors before you're getting blown out? Why not use your 2 young stars in tandem?
Malik Neighbors was wondering the same thing after the game. Have you seen his post-game interviews? No,
I haven't.
I don't. It was kind of like I don't come up with the game plan. I don't know why we were running it so much. So, yeah.
Because let me come back on the other side of this. And granted, 8 of them were Jaden Daniels basically scrambles. But you end up with 38 carries for the Commanders as a result. This is a game where, maybe the Giants are just saying, we didn't think we could stop Jaden Daniels, but part of what they do well is get to the quarterback. When you have created a game context in which there is no pressure on the Washington Commanders, then you're also not going to sack him a bunch. They get 0 sacks in this game, a team that is the thing that they do well on defense. Instead, you end up in a situation where the thing that they don't do well is stop the run. And there are a lot of things they don't do well, but they certainly don't stop the run. They get 38 carries against them. They actually hold the Commanders to only 4 yards per carry, in part because, you're getting a healthy dose of Chris Rodriguez, Austin Eckler, and Jerry McNichols. I like those guys, but those are not the guys that you're necessarily expecting to, gash your team for 150-yard days, especially in 2024. Obviously, Austin Eckler in the past. This game is just like a throwaway NFL game where the Giants came out and basically said, we would prefer not to play football anymore this year. Well, you have two choices. You can get fired or you can play the rest of the season. Very disappointing.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. That sums up my notes, Shawn. Very disappointing. But that is going to be where we leave it for this edition of RotoViz OT. We will be back with our second part of the slate recap. I've mentioned this on the last few weeks, but we have released that on Tuesday afternoons Eastern time for people who are subscribed to the RotoViz Overtime podcast feed to get it on audio platforms. So if you are interested in getting those shows earlier than they would be up on video or on the main feed, make sure you are subscribed, get those once they are available. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. My co-host is Shawn Siegele. Check out Shawn's work up on rotoviz.com. And until we are back, have a good one.